Strange Supreme is a sweet and seemingly playable new card. We had a solid OTA update. Let's go ahead and dive on into our best decks roundup for Marvel Snap this week. I've been loving Strange Supreme so much, I actually did a new card deep dive on the channel for the first time in a long time earlier this week. I'll link that whole thing in the video description down below in case you missed it, but a too long didn't watch is that he's a really sweet build-around card that fits into a few different shells. This one in particular is the one that I personally have been enjoying the most and found the most success with. It has a solid mixture of Strange and Mockingbird and Sam Wilson as methods to scale up your stats. And then we mix in a dash of disruption with armor and juggernaut, both being able to break up whatever your opponent is doing while also protecting our Strange Supreme from opposing tech cards like Shang-Chi. And we kind of top it off with a Marvel Boy package, allowing you to power up the one drops from Squirrel Girl and Shauna so they can still be generating value for you in the games where Strange is nowhere to be found. Zogard is the last card worth mentioning here. I think she's really powerful in a variety of matchups, especially into the Limbo decks. Being able to rug pull them on the last turn is really powerful, and she just serves as a way to smooth out location variants that's often difficult for decks like this playing lower curves. My second Jeff's pick this week is a classic that I had an absolutely insane run with inside of the top of Infinite. It feels like so many people have just not seen an Infinite in a while that I was winning so many games where I just passed on turn 5, and then my opponent stayed in a game where they were just dead to me slamming down 20 points of power. This decklist Dirty 30 title comes from the fact that a lot of the time you're going to be doing a whole lot more than just that, though. SheHulk plus Infinite on turn 6 after you pass with 6 unused energy on turn 5 with Hope Summers, or Magic giving you an extra turns, a lot of stats in a lot of places. Another frequently common line that she'll execute is Hope Summers on 3, Shuri into the Hope Summers path on 4, and then you'll pass on turn 5 and you let to slam 20 into the Shuri path with SheHulk and Infinite somewhere else in a way to keep your opponent guessing. I also think this deck list is pretty budget friendly. Our higher series cards, Thaddeus and Hope Summers, are both very replaceable here along with Suitor. Thaddeus can just be a different big bomb like a Red Hulk or a Magneto to give you redundancy in the games where Infinite doesn't show up, and Hope Summers can be a different energy acceleration card. Something like Luna Snow is ideal, but Psylocke can also do in a pinch, so that way you can be passing on turn 5 with 6 energy to make She-Hulk free alongside Infinite on the last turn of the game. My last Jeff's pick this week is this Wiccan shell that's one of my favorite ways to play this card. Essentially, we're not doing anything cute like Quicksilver or Domino to make sure that we're spending our energy early. Instead, we're just playing a high density of reasonable quality 1 and 2 energy plays that have synergy with each other thanks to Quinjet and Victoria hand tying the room together. All of our card generation then serves double duty, not only filling our curve early, but also making sure that we have plenty of things to spend our energy on in the games where Wiccan shows up to amp us up. This deck list output range is often difficult for your opponent to calculate. Not only do Luke Cage and Juggernaut often throw a wrench into whatever they have going on, but Quinjet discounting your cards and Victoria Hand adding stats across the board is often difficult for your opponent to count up exactly what you're going to have going on. As far as higher series cards go, this deck list does not have many great replacements. I would say Victoria Hand, Frigga, and Wiccan are all pretty important for the core power level of what this deck is doing. Valentina can be subbed out for something else that's generating a card that is a cheap energy cost, and Nico Minaro can be just a different energy efficient one drop such as Spider Ham or Iceman to help fill your curve early for Wiccan. Moving along to our high potential category, this group has deck lists that have really potent stats on untapped, albeit in small sample sizes. They could be the next breakout thing in the metagame, but there's also a good chance that they level off a little bit back to reasonable as their sample size picks up as they get showcased in videos like this one. We kick off our high potential category with this Sam Wilson Strange Supreme control deck. This deck list is very much not all in on Strange. In fact, his only enablers here are Squirrel Girl as well as Sam Wilson Shield, effectively just leveraging him as another on rate 2 energy play, regularly going to get up to 5 points of power when he eats the shield, but sometimes hitting, 8 or even 11 if Squirrel Girl's in the mix as well. This power on the board early helps you grab priority, making cards like Rocket and Groot, Cosmo, Teenage Warhead, and eventually Alioth in the late game a lot more potent at shutting down whatever your opponent has going on. Our next high potential deck list is an updated take featuring the buffed Captain Carter in a shell that I've really enjoyed in the past, and that's Moon Girl Moonstone. Essentially, you've got a bunch of efficient ongoing cards that Moonstone can double up the stats that they're adding to the board. Moonstone's effect alongside the recently buffed Carter is incredibly efficient. If you have Moonstone as the first card in your path and then Carter as your second, you're going to be adding a whopping +8 to everything in your backline before you even factor in other buffs. Notable call out in this particular deck list is the inclusion of a copy of Cosmo despite our handful of on-reveals. This is because Moonstone is often going to be a magnet for anti-ongoing technology such as Enchantress, so when you're playing into deck lists that are likely to be leveraging that tech card, you're going to want to be conscious of Cosmoing your path where all your ongoings are in. The easy and obvious choice for playing Captain Carter after her large buff to a 3 energy card is obviously alongside Silver Surfer, letting you cleanly get her stats up to 4 on the last turn of the game, letting her buff your backline even more. This sample deck list that I have on your screen is just one of many that's posting really solid stats on Untapped right now. This one's doing a couple of especially cute things with Fenris Wolf alongside Gladiator, giving you a way to generate extra stats out of your 2 energy play, and Sam Wilson, I think, is a noteworthy call out as a 2-drop in these Captain Carter Surfer decks because his shield allows you to fill her lane up more efficiently even when you're lacking other cards to play out. Other notable Surfer lists include things like Sarah as well as Absorbing Man, and it's not clear to me from a data-driven perspective this soon after our most recent OTA what is the optimal Surfer build. I would love to hear in the comments down below if you've tooled around with these builds at all, what you think might come out on top for them. Moving along to our top performers per Untapped metrics, the Ajax Miles deck that we've covered in the past is currently coming out on top for most of the top slices of the infinite data on the tracker. I actually had a chance to play this deck list on my stream for a few hours over the recent drops campaign, and I came away really impressed by it. In my mind, it plays out very similarly to the Darkhawk stature decks of old, where you have pretty efficient stats that you don't mind playing down early, and Sam Wilson, Scorpion, and stuff like Silver Sable, and then you're closing out the game with an ongoing threat of Ajax alongside either Miles Morales or High Evolutionary Abomination, giving you a solid amount of stats in 2 different lanes. This deck list is a little bit susceptible to Luke Cage as an opposing tech card, but you do have a copy of Red Guardian, so if your opponent plays him out early, there's often going to be a lot of situations where you can go ahead and tag him in the mid to late game, unlocking your potent hazmat synergies. To the surprise of few, it would appear that the Scream push your opponent's cards around archetype is still very, very good, despite both Scream and Sam Wilson each getting a point shaved off of the top. This archetype just has so many efficient 2-drop stat sticks, it's able to add a ton of points to the board early, and then you get to control where your opponent's stuff ends up at while finishing on things like Cannonball and Arrow as solid top-end finishers. One thing that I think is worth calling out is that this particular build that's one of the best performing on the Untapped tracker is actually a bit less popular than the Lady Deathstrike variation that's been going around, but this build actually has really mediocre stats after the update in the few hundred games that are logged so far. I'm going to be curious to see if it can perhaps pull those back up as the sample size grow, but early metrics would indicate that this more traditional build that's not trying to play the cutesy tech cards and Uncle Ben is likely the better place to be. If you're someone that's played with both of these after the update and you might have some insight on why that difference is, I would love to hear about in the comments down below. Finally, to the surprise of absolutely no one who's been playing Marvel Snap in any capacity since Strange Supreme released, Thanos variations are not only the most popular, but also among the best performing decks on Untapped after the OTA update. The most popular of the Thanos builds is definitely this Wiccan tech card amalgamation. In fact, some of the builds are playing even more tech cards than this one, leaning into things like Shadow King and even Alioth at the top end, in addition to Shang-Chi, Enchantress, and Red Guardian. One amusing thing I noticed is that some of the more successful builds have picked up playing Fastos as a 3/4 given his recent buff, but it's unclear to me as of yet whether Fastos is necessarily ideal here or if just the rest of the deck is so powerful it can carry along despite his dead wait. The second most popular build of Thanos is the ongoing / zoo variation that's leveraging the buffed Captain Carter. A noteworthy call out here is that the better performing builds of this, as expected, are not playing Strange Supreme. He's very actively detrimental in a deck that's looking to fill its lanes for Ant-Man and spread out power with Blue Marvel and Spectrum, since he's frequently going to be eating your stones that provide valuable bodies on the board for you. I gotta be honest, I had a ton of fun playing Marvel Snap this week, and I played a lot of it because of both drops happening and Strange Supreme being an awesome new card release for the first time in a minute, and the over-the-air update being pretty solid as well. Speaking of that, one card from the OTA you'll note that was pretty absent from this was Toxin as well as Rhino. Toxin didn't really move the needle on bounce deck, struggling into all the tech cards in this metagame despite getting +1, and Rhino's rework is novel, being a 3/6 that makes a rocket his location, but I think he gets outclassed in a lot of the decks where you could possibly want to play him. I'll have a highlight with him up on my secondary decks channel later this weekend, but honestly, he was pretty whelming if I'm being completely true. I appreciate everybody that made it all the way through to the end of the video. If you enjoyed my decks roundup this week, be sure to smash the like button. If you happen to be new here and you enjoy finding lots of different off-meta and competitive decks every week, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming ones in the future. Personally, I'm looking forward to our economy update next week as well. It feels like a great time to be a Marvel Snapper. I appreciate everybody that made it all the way through the end, and I hope you close out whatever your ranked goals are before the end of the season here soon.